Hey Dara, I got some thoughts and feelings about things, so I'm going to talk about those real quick. Hey everyone, this is Cailin from First Reaction Fan Reaction here at Witty Clues Productions, and I was just coming to you today to talk about some things that are giving me some feelings. Most importantly, I am talking today about one of my favorite series of all time, which is Avatar: The Last Airbender. Now you're probably thinking, Cailin, the show ended like 11 years ago, why are we talking about this? And I have actually a very good point. I mean, really, I could talk about it at any point in the day for any extended period of time, but there's actually something that came up, and no, it's not the Netflix live action series. So recently, on April 1st, and I swear to you, this is not an April Fool's joke, Aaron Ehasz, who was one of the head writers on Avatar, wasn't one of the two main creators, but he was actually responsible for a lot of the big decisions that went into the series, most namely, off the top of my head, the reason why Toph ended up being a young blind girl instead of a big macho guy. This guy right here. This guy. That was the original Toph design. So he's made a lot of big decisions in the series, and he made some tweets talking about the show, even though, like I said, the show ended like 11 years ago and he's already moved on to his own projects. So I'm just going to read them here because I thought they were super interesting. So at Aaron Ehasz on Twitter says, I always intended for Azula to have a redemption arc in the story of Avatar: The Last Airbender. Longer and far more complicated than Zuko's, she had not bottomed in the end of season 3, she had further to go. At the deepest moment in her own abyss, she would have found Zuko. Despite it all, her brother Zuko would be there for her, believing in her, sticking by her, doing his best to understand and help her hold her pain that she can no longer hold alone. Zuko, patient, forgiving, and unconditionally loving, all strengths he gained from Uncle Iroh. That's how she would have gotten out and changed, with the faith and love of someone she had hurt, but who stuck by her anyway. Just as he had been saved by faith and love from someone he had hurt, but who stuck by him. And I always imagined that after coming out the other side, she would be one of those people who hilariously overshares her own feelings all the time, and that she would be a bit over-apologetic, like a Canadian version of Azula. And so he also says someone asked him, how they were planning on doing it out, if there was going to be a more to the show. And Aaron says, yes, I always believed there would be a 4th season. So there's a couple things to unpack here. Let's quick just address the thing about the 4th season, because I found this super interesting, because for years and years and years and years, literally going back to old interviews that were happening during the show's original run, it was always stated that the show would be 3 seasons, and that would be Air, Earth, and Fire. No need for a book for Air, because that, Aang had already mastered that, and by then the war was already going to be over, so really no need to have a 4th season. So it was a super interesting note to see that, yes, they had planned for a 4th season, and Aaron goes on to explain that basically the movie was the reason why this got sidelined. Apparently M. Night had pushed for a 4th season, but Mike and Brian were wanted to stick on the 3rd season, and this contradicts so much that I feel like we've heard. Even Aaron Ehasz in Reddit AMA said that they were always planning on doing 3 seasons, and I'm pretty sure that's right, so I'm going to fact check myself right here. See, I was right. So I thought that was super interesting that this whole time we could have had a 4th season, and there was actually thoughts on doing it, and it just never went through. And so now, I'm reeling from the realization that we could have had more content that wasn't the comics, because I'm not a huge fan of the comics, but we can get into that later. Okay, so now into the big topic of this tweet thread, this series, this reveal of information, and that is a redemption arc for Azula. And when I first read this, I actually wasn't happy with it. Like I said, Avatar is my favorite show of all time. It's so hard for me to find flaws with it. I mean, going back, we can always point out things that they could have done better, that they could have done more of, that things I wished I saw more of, but I'm always kind of first to make those observations with The Legend of Korra, the sequel series, rather than I am Avatar: The Last Airbender. And I guess you can say I have some nostalgic goggles on, but also it's so hard to find anyone who thinks it's just a bad series, because it's just a very well done series, and I will stand by that probably forever. To hear that they were thinking of changing it was really interesting to me, because I thought Azula's arc was so good, because it was so tragic. I think we see a lot of characters that are just straight all bad, because they're evil, or we see characters who are not all evil get to go through some kind of redemption in other shows, and we don't see kind of that in between. And this was a character who, you know, was obviously had some real underlying problems, and then just had this very tragic kind of descent into not just being evil, but just being mad, just being not well. And just how it's handled in the book 3 finale was so interesting, so poetically beautiful, that to hear that they were thinking of changing that was like, no, they shouldn't have done that. But I have changed my thinking since then. I have taken a step back. I have let these tweets simmer in my brain, and I have decided that actually, I wouldn't have minded seeing that. But to clarify, I think because if what I initially thought, oh, they were going to do a redemption arc for Azula, it meant that they were going to try to redeem her within those 3 books, and that just wouldn't have worked. They didn't have enough time to set her up the way they did, and then for them to come back around. If they tried to do that within that 3-season span, it would have felt kind of cheap and wouldn't have had the same amount of emotional impact that it would have. But if they were thinking of doing a 4th season, then that span of time would have actually been really great for a redemption arc. So I actually would have really liked to see that. And so now I'm here rethinking absolutely everything I thought about the series, because we could have gotten that 4th season, and we could have gotten a redemption arc for Azula, 2 things that I didn't think we ever needed. And now thinking about that and thinking about the possibilities, I really actually think that would have been a good idea. So I'm sitting here going back and forth, like, what do I think of that? Oh my goodness. And then that goes to raise a bunch of other questions about what else would have been in that 4th season, because obviously the whole thing just wouldn't be mostly about that kind of redemption arc. There would have had been a lot of other things. Would we have seen similar storylines to The Promise and all the other comics? Would we probably would have actually gotten to see the reunion with Zuko and his mom and have it not be like it was in the comics, because I don't like those. And we would have probably seen a lot more of things fans probably wanted to see. And then I'm really curious how other characters would have grown in that time span. So I don't have the answers for that. And now I'm super curious. I want to know what everyone here is thinking, what they would have liked to see. Because when I first went into this, I was not sold on the idea of another season because it felt unnecessary, because they wrapped up the big storyline. But now we can sit back and think, well, if they had another season, they could have actually expanded on so much more. We would have gotten to see things beyond just the conflict of the 100-Year War. So it's a lot. It's a lot to sit here and be like, 10 years after this series ended, when we're still talking about this, I think that just goes to speak to the impact this show has had. Well, thank you for listening to me ramble, everybody. Again, my name is Cailin. I am from Witty Close Productions. You can follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, listen to us on iTunes, or watch our videos while we are currently doing our review and reactions of Gravity Falls, another show that I really like that I think could have used another season. Until next time, you can always leave us comments down below. Love to hear your thoughts, love to interact with you, and then you can catch me and Dara on our main series. Peace!